Welcome to Crosspoint.
Welcome to Crosspoint.
Welcome to Crosspoint.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
welcome home.
welcome home.
There's a world at war, caught in suffering, silent casualties. God grant us peace. In these sleepless nights, I can hardly breathe. Despite brutality, I know that we'll be free. I know that we'll be. So let the light in, keep it shining, let it break into the darkness. All the love there's us to see, we'll all be free.
In these desperate times, love will hold us here. Love will join our hands, teach us to have no fear. So we'll lay our down to wash their feet when we see our sister. Oh, we'll all be free. Oh, yes, we'll all be free. So let the light nothing left to do. Lay it all down. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. Carried on, but your heart was tired. Feared the worst and felt the fire. Lay it all down. Lay it all down. Filled with all those anxious thoughts, and all your doubts became your God. Lay it all down. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. When we've given up on better days, there are memories we can't erase. Lay it all down. Lay it all down. We've come to feel what we can't explain. There's nothing here to ease the pain. Lay it all down. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus.
Hi friends, I've got a few announcements for us real quick, and all of these announcements have everything to do with each of us being more integrated into what we're doing together, who we are together, more merged into what we're talking about when we say Crosspoint, which now that I'm hearing myself say that out loud, I'm wondering, does that sound too Borgy? You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. Welcome to Crosspoint. If you don't know what the Borg is, I just mean that might have sounded sort of creepy, but we want to always be providing spaces beyond church on Sunday morning where there can be a greater sense of belonging, if that's what you want, a greater sense of collaboration, having some people who know you and you know them. It's not so anonymous anymore, but something more connected, something frankly more human. Well, one of the simplest ways that we do this is with our groups, and our winter groups sign up is already underway. These groups are really unique. They're different sizes, different formats. They meet at different times. Some are more service focused. Some are more conversation based. Some are virtual. Some are in person. But what's similar about them is that they all give us an opportunity to connect with each other and to wake up more to ourselves and to others. So if you want to know more about that, or you want to just go ahead and get signed up, you can go to crosspoint.org/groups. Now, if you're a college student or a young adult, there are group opportunities for you as well. There's some group events coming up, like Trivia Night on Crosspoint's campus, February 6th, and then on February 9th. And then after that, there are other events coming too, more opportunities for those of us in this phase looking to connect with others in that same phase of life. So if you want to know more about that, go to the College and Young Adult Instagram page at Crosspoint Cary YA, or you can just go to our website, crosspoint.org/youngadults, or you can email like an old person, youngadults@crosspoint.org, and we'll get back to you fast. We also know that some of us feel like it's sort of difficult to care about or feel like you fit into something like a group right now because we're grieving. Grieving takes up a lot of energy, and it also makes us feel like nobody understands where you're coming from right now anyway. So oftentimes it's like, yeah, I'll do that stuff later when I get through what I'm going through. If I'm describing you, whether it's a new space that you're in or it's, you've been grieving something for some time now, we want you to know that we're going to have a group that deals specifically with grief. For 4 weeks, this group is going to meet in person on Monday evenings throughout February. And the group is going to be led by a therapist from Horizons Integrated Wellness, and they're going to help facilitate discussion, give everybody a chance to speak if they want to, feel heard, provide tools for navigating and honoring the difficulties of grieving for that specific kind of pain. So if you want to know more about this, you want to register, you just go to the same groups page, crosspoint.org/groups. And if what you're interested in is all this, but you want to meet virtually, there's going to be some virtual options provided at a later date. As always, if you want to help financially sustain what Crosspoint does day in and day out, not just on Sunday, but really every day of the week throughout our community, there are several ways to do that. You can go to crosspoint.org/contribute to find multiple ways to fund what we're doing together. You can even text crosspointenc to 77977 and find out how to contribute directly from your phone. And just as a reminder, this is how we do it. This is how we fund all the things that we do together. It's us doing it together. There's no corporate headquarters that keeps all this going. There's no denominational mothership helping us do this. It doesn't work like that here. There's no Crosspoint barbecue sauce on shelves out there somewhere generating income for us so that we can do all that we do. It's you and I, us, making this thing go. And so thank you a ton for remembering that. And it occurs to me now, let me know if you want to talk about the barbecue sauce thing. That might have legs. There's a lot more to know about opportunities to get connected and involved with others at Crosspoint. More to get involved in. We don't want you busy. We just want you to be as included and as together, as integrated as you want to be, because we all do better when what we're doing together is done together. You know what I mean. Thank you, Crosspoint. Look forward to walking this journey more with you. See you soon.
All right, so I have a question for you. How many of you love surprises? How many of you are surprise haters? If you love surprises, you might love the rush of being taken off guard. You have no trouble waiting to open gifts. You like variety and change. You like being kept on your toes. If you're a surprise hater, you probably shouldn't be thrown a surprise party because you might be more likely to punch somebody in the face than to celebrate. Maybe you are more for planning and predictable endings. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. Nobody likes a bad surprise. Surprise is unavoidable. It's actually really important to have in our lives. Some surprises are welcome, some are not. If you have too many surprises, you may become numb. You start shaking your head and saying things like, nothing surprises me anymore, right? But too little surprise, and we may begin to believe that there's nothing extraordinary to be expected out of the world. And as you may recall, if you've had any exposure to the Christian Bible at all, it's packed full of surprises. A lot of us, though, we've heard the stories so many times that often they fail to raise our eyebrows anymore. There's a lot in there that's surprising. There's talking animals, there's walking on water, God's presence in celebration and in pain. God shows up in unexpected places, in a backwater town rather than the capital city, in baby flesh instead of armor, in the outsider and the refugee and the outcast rather than the most powerful and popular. And so the next time you read a story in the Bible, take note of some of those surprises. Today, I want to focus on a particular story of surprise. It's found in all 4 of the books that give accounts of Jesus' life. Sometimes those are referred to as the Gospels. And it's actually told 6 times in these 4 books. It's placed in the narratives right after Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, had just been brutally murdered by the beheading by King Herod. and he did it as a gift to his stepdaughter. It reads like this. This is Matthew chapter 14. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company, and she pleased Herod so much that he promised on oath to grant her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." The king was grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he commanded it to be given. And he sent and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, who brought it to her mother. His disciples came and took the body of John and buried him. Then they went and told Jesus. And now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. And there's a lot to be surprised here, even shocked about in this story. Many people who knew John, they probably suspected that he might eventually lose his life for his bold preaching, for his unconventional life choices. King Herod especially hated John because John spoke out against his personal, morally questionable choices. John was a boat rocker. Those who liked him loved him. Those who didn't wanted to see him disappear. But despite all of that, everyone was seemingly surprised by the unpredictable events that ended John's life. And as comes with the surprise of any loss, there wasn't time, there wasn't enough means to prepare for it. Jesus' friends must have known how deeply shaken Jesus would be by his cousin's death, because before they broke the news to Jesus, they took care of John's body. And it does seem that Jesus was pretty surprised and very much grieved by John's death, as any of us who've experienced loss also would have been. Nobody, apparently not even the Christ, could fully plan for the ways that grief works its way into our bones and our bloodstream. Jesus' initial response to the surprise of grief was a change of scenery. He went to a solitude. He went to a lonely and deserted place. He stepped away from the roar and the needs of the multitudes of the people who'd begun following him wherever he went. We don't know how long Jesus stayed there, but we're told that eventually it was actually compassion that brought him back. He was filled, what it says, he was moved in his bowels, which was believed to be the center of emotion at that time. But it basically means that Jesus felt something in his gut, in his being. He felt the pull of the needs of the people so much that it brought him out of solitude and back to the crowds. And Jesus didn't have to look far to find them. They followed him. They were waiting anxiously, but at a respectable distance nearby. And that part of the story is actually not surprising. They knew what Jesus could do. The crowds had heard, they'd seen the transformation that occurred when people encountered Jesus. And although they'd maybe seen it, they maybe experienced the miraculous, they continued to be surprised and amazed by Jesus. And that's why they flocked to him and stayed around. And they didn't want to risk stepping away even for a moment, lest they miss their chance at what proximity to Jesus might mean. So they waited for him. And they waited. And they waited. And the day turned into evening. And then this is how the story goes. Again in Matthew chapter 14. When it came evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go to the villages and buy food for themselves." And Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." And the disciples replied, "We've got nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets and full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Now, perhaps Jesus wanted the company of the crowd to take his mind off of his grief. Perhaps his focus on the needs of the people gave him comfort. Perhaps Jesus recognized in that moment, more than he had in the past, his need for people and their need for him and for one another. But regardless, Jesus asked his disciples to have the crowd stay, which seemed kind of unusual. But the disciples, ever the practical ones, they were surprised by this. They instantly saw the holes in Jesus' plan, which wasn't surprising. Although only the men were counted here, I want to take a quick note. I want to be clear that although this is in the gospel, as Will Gaffney says, this isn't the gospel, because the gospel counts and includes all people, regardless. This is just the way that the story was counted and told at that time. Now, Feeding people by mysterious means was not a new theme in the Bible, although it didn't make it any less surprising in this narrative. So way back, Elijah had been fed by ravens. The prophet Elisha had fed 100 soldiers than less than 24 loaves of bread. God fed Israelites when they were wandering, starving in the wilderness. They'd had nothing to eat, so God fed them. Every day when they woke up, first thing in the morning, there was manna on the ground that would be collected and eaten until everybody was full. It was a surprise breakfast miracle every day, and I would love one of those. I would really love for it to include coffee. Well, eventually, the Israelites stopped being surprised by the monotony of angelic baked goods, and they began to complain about the monotony. They stopped being able to see, or they stopped actually looking for the wonder of an everyday miracle because it had become a part of their ordinary, mundane lives. I find that happens to me a lot. Things that should amaze me fall sometimes into the category of, meh, I've seen it already, right? And the miracle of turning scarcity into abundance, in this case, was about to happen again on the hillside with Jesus and these people. Now, it might be just me, but I find it difficult to believe that in a crowd of much more than 5,000 people, especially with women and children, and with people who had journeyed to spend time with Jesus and knew that it probably would take them a long time, I find it hard for me to believe that there was so little food to be found. Because if there were parents with kids there, you better believe they had a snack or two stashed away in their pockets. And if anyone there was anything like my baby brother, you knew that they never went anywhere without a snack. It's not likely that there was no food. It's simply more likely that they weren't willing to share what they had. I imagine a lot of the people present, they probably figured at some point in the night, they'd huddle up around their own private fires, dig into their pockets and their pouches, and they eat quietly and secretly alone with family, maybe hiding their chewing behind their hands so they wouldn't encourage anybody else to join them. Everybody for themselves, desperate times, all of that. Jesus had a habit of surprising people, and the multiplication of food was indeed a miracle. But it seems that something even more important than dinner happened when a feast suddenly showed up in the middle of the crowd. There was no longer a need for self-preservation. Isolation and selfish inclinations gave way to community celebration. Turning people from inward to outward was indeed a miracle because it transcended the normal way of things. It was a surprising turn of events. And what started for many as a personal or family pilgrimage to see Jesus turned into something that looked a lot more like the kingdom of God. Kids began playing together. Grumpy grandpas started swapping stories. New friends were made. Laughter echoes. Burdens were shared. It's not hard to imagine that a few people pulled out instruments and singing and dancing ensued. People left the experience changed, not because they had full bellies. And not only because they had heard from Jesus, but because Jesus had surprised them by showing them how things could be. A little glimpse into the kingdom of God and what it was supposed to look like. Unexpected, surprising. It looked a lot more like communing with one another and a lot less like selfishness. And I imagine the people learned a lot about themselves that day as well. Jesus was interested in feeding more than just the physical. Scarcity became abundance in more ways than just dinner. Something happens when abundance is shared. When we look at it from our side of history, we can ask ourselves, what does that say about our responsibilities as citizens of the kingdom of God? How does that challenge us to restructure our systems that foster isolation, that breed inequality and scarcity? What would change if we believed that abundance was better shared? If we turned outward? I've read that surprise is one of the only emotions that requires immediate interpretation. That's because surprise is something that happens to us. Because by definition, surprise can't be planned. Without our consent, surprise takes away our control. And every time that happens, a new belief is formed in us. A new belief about what we know, about what we thought we knew. A new belief about ourselves, about what the disruption of our expectations actually means. Understandings, assumptions that we had so neatly wrapped up in our minds turned out not to be as accurate as we thought, even on the smallest scale. Surprise forces us to face our assumptions, and therefore our response to it has the opportunity to change us. If we're honest, some of us feel better about this than others. And Brene Brown calls surprise a bridge emotion. And that's because it only lasts a moment, and then it leads us into another emotion. Now, our personality, who we are, what we've experienced, has a big hand in determining what emotion we might jump to when we're confronted with surprise, good surprises or bad surprises. My mother and I are a really good example of this. We look at unexpected things that come in our lives very differently. I tend to be over the top positive, looking for the greatest things in there, sometimes annoyingly so, I've been told. My mother is the opposite. Everything unexpected is most likely going to lead to the worst possible outcome, possibly the destruction of humanity. And because of that, all scenarios must be planned for. So if you're someone who tends to be more anxious or who likes to maintain a little more control, you might find that surprise is a bridge to the negative emotions for you, or fear. Surprise feels like something that needs to be stopped or needs to be fixed, something that needs to be put back in order or avoided, maybe at all costs. A reasonable amount of surprise is okay, but too much and it triggers this self-preservation response, and you may be pushed to respond in fear or anger or anxiety. Maybe surprises haven't proven to be positive in your life, so you spend a lot of time and energy trying to keep surprise out of your life in the first place. Keeps things predictable. Now, others of us, we may find it easier to embrace surprise. We like to keep things new and exciting, to be amazed, and new things and knowledge and experiences, they don't bother us. But it also could be that we embrace surprise because we like the disruption, because it keeps us from being tied down, keeps us from committing too fully. Surprises happen and they let us off the hook for a lot of commitments, including relational ones. And all of us, surprise haters, surprise seekers, everybody in between, we live our lives within the same boat of uncertainty, within the framework of surprise, because there is very little about our lives that we can predict or control. We can plan, but we can't guarantee. We may not have control over surprise, but we can determine which bridge we choose when we're presented with it. And that, of course, means stopping long enough to choose a pathway. Surprise is a bridge to self-preservation or disruption, but it can also be a bridge to wonder. And at the root of wonder is curiosity. In the case of the story in Matthew, wonder is what causes grief to surround itself with community. It's what turns scarcity into abundance. Wonder is what turns a late-night solitary snack on an unfamiliar hillside into a community feast. Wonder offers new perspective on the scary and on the mundane. And choosing the bridge towards wonder is a spiritual and mental discipline. Discipline being exactly what it sounds like, something that takes practice. It isn't an easy habit to cultivate because it requires us to have to stop after that initial feeling of surprise response and interpret what we're experiencing. It invites us to choose curiosity. When we're surprised by a situation or a person or a circumstance, when we have a healthy diet of wonder in our lives, we say, rather than jumping to conclusions, we choose to be curious about the rest of the story. Challenges us to put our assumptions on the shelf, choose to dig a little bit deeper. We can ask questions like, I wonder why, when this particular thing happened, that person responded to the same event one way, and I responded to it another. We can ask questions like, I wonder what's making this person respond this way. There must be more to the story. Wonder chooses new perspectives rather than old bias. It refuses the impulse to believe that someone acts a certain way or does certain things because they are blank. Fill it in with whatever stereotype you would like. Because they are a woman, a certain race, a certain age, from the South. You get the idea. The discipline of wonder allows us to be surprised by the individuality of each person. no matter what group they may identify with. It asks us to ask deeper questions about them and about ourselves. We also have the ability, and I would say the responsibility, to surprise others with how we respond and interact with them. Cultivating wonder in our interactions and relationships with others means that we choose to speak life into them. When what they might normally expect, when they mess up or do something that we might not think is great, they might expect a completely different response. As Nadia Bolz-Weber says, we can surprise people by choosing to say instead, "You're a mess and you are loved. You have a little issue with anger, you're loved. I've not even known you that long, but you're loved. You think you're going through this alone, but you're wrong and you're loved. The thing you're experiencing right now seems so big, but what is bigger is that you are loved." Surprising people means when someone makes a mistake, we choose to uplift rather than to negatively criticize. We do this by asking, what made this person do this? We walk away from revenge. We choose kindness over animosity. Those are acts of surprise, and those are words of life that make us wonder about ourselves and where we fit into the world and how we relate to other people. I heard a really great analogy this week. Think about someone who enters a party. If that person has been told that they're good looking and popular, when they walk into the crowd, when people look at them, they believe it's because they're popular and good looking and worthy of being looked at. But if somebody else walks into the crowd and before they go in, they're told they're unattractive and unlovable, when they walk into that party, the same glances have a completely different meaning. They may believe people are looking at them because they're not worth looking at, or they're unworthy of being there. When is the last time you had a moment of wonder that caused you to say, "Oh my God," or just "Wow"? Either because something was so surprising that it amazed you, or because you were reminded of just how extraordinary everyday things really are. Can you remember a single moment when you experienced wonder that really meant something to you? I can, and there are a lot of them are big markers in my life. But we're called to surprise and wonder in more than just the big moments. We're called to cultivate wonder in our everyday. We're actually directed to practice wonder quite often in the Bible. Stuff like, consider the lilies of the field, think about the birds, look at the heavens, be still, consider the children. The list could go on. How do we add wonder to our lives? Well, we might start by disciplining ourselves to look for it, to seek it out in everyday places, to make noticing a habit. My husband and I went to Iceland to celebrate our anniversary several years ago, and the country is absolutely amazing. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been. There is wonder around every single turn, and it can quite literally take your breath away. In fact, there was so much beauty that after about 2 days, I started to find myself unsurprised by it. Would turn a corner and there would be a beautiful mountain and the ocean and cute little sheep and a waterfall, and I would just think, I've seen that already, right? I began to expect it. So I had to reframe myself. I started to try to think small. I started to try to notice the small wonders in that amazingly vast landscape. A snail, a flower peeking out of a crack. I started to think about how amazing and wonderful it was that an airplane had flown us over the ocean to that incredible island in the first place. The fact that the sun never set while we were there and we could hike at 1 o'clock in the morning. The fact that I was traveling with someone I'd been in a relationship with for 11 years and still liked. I needed to remind myself that wonder wasn't just found in big things. It was available all around. Don't get me wrong, I still awed at the waterfalls. Wonder takes discipline. And when faced with surprise, rather than allowing our initial reaction to take over, we discipline ourselves to pause and simply say, "Wow, that was unexpected," before we assign additional meaning to it. So if you're a person who goes out of your way to keep surprise out of your world, perhaps that means trying something new. Maybe open your fists a little bit. Let go of some of the control. Let wonder in. Drive a new way to work. Take a class. Change your routine. Pick up a book outside of your typical genre. Notice the steam coming off of your coffee. Practice gratitude. If you are already a surprise junkie, force yourself to stop, to be still for a moment, to look around and allow yourself to be surprised. Try to think of your everyday world in a new way, as unique, as gratitude worthy. Discipline yourself to recognize wonder in your ordinary, because all of life is extraordinary. And remembering this, no matter whether we're surprise avoiders or seekers, it helps root us in what is important, because all of us need the discipline of accepting surprise and normalizing wonder in our lives. The great Steve Doherty asked me this week, what if wonder is a nutrient? Now, science is pretty clear that we need surprise and wonder for our brains to continue to function properly. It keeps our brains from becoming atrophied and lazy. It helps us locate our place on the planet. But what if embracing wonder, seeking it out, is more than just good for our brains? What if it's a nutrient for our souls? And the cheesiness of that is cringeworthy, but I don't know how else to say it. What if embracing surprise and wonder is how we partner with God and one another in healing the world? Because when we embrace wonder, when we pause to look for it, it causes us to see the world and each other and ourselves in new ways. Since we rarely get the time for intentional wonder, although we're going to practice that, I want to give us time to do that today. So grab a pencil or open the Notes app on your phone, and in a moment there'll be 6 images that come on the screen, one at a time. When you see an image, take note of your first reaction. Is it aversion? Is it curiosity? Is it surprise? Sit with it for a few more seconds and try to reapproach it with wonder. Notice if anything changes from your first reaction. Don't reinterpret or overthink your response. Just notice it. Jot it down. you notice? Did you cringe at some? Did you have little or no feelings to some of them? Why do you think that is? What happened when you gave it a little deeper thought? Does it change your perspective to think that there are hundreds of Crosspoint friends who will view these images, and all of us will have unique reactions and responses? Why? Let's wonder about their wonder. What makes their response to something identical different from ours? This is one of the reasons we're called back into community. One of the reasons I think Christ took the time to turn people from inward to outward. Because as beautiful as we all are, we can only ever have a narrow understanding. Together, we see and understand so much more. That's yet another reason for wonder. So let's be people who work to embrace surprise and cultivate wonder in our lives. I think it's going to make a difference. We're going to close today with a prayer in the form of a video.
God of holy surprises, infuse us with your wild wonder. Attune our hearts to all the ways you dance through the world, from the ordinary to the sublime. Sustain us in the daily practice of opening our eyes to grace. Expand our imaginations to see more deeply and more widely than before. Align us with all the ways you are at work, always extending a new vision when all seems shut down. Help us to experience the eruption of seeds in springtime and that abundant growth as a sign of your generous love. Inspire us to begin again and again.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspoint, go to crosspoint.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspoint.org/care. And welcome home.